Salutations, I am GOJIRACELL. Today we are going to explain and demonstrate how to use note blocks. We will start with the basics and progressively work towards more advanced techniques. Feel free to skip around to try and find anything you might be looking for, especially if you already have a good grasp on how the basics work. Additionally, while we would like to teach you exactly how some things work, we also want to give you the skills to experiment and figure out how other things work on your own. With that being said, let's get straight into some epic educational content. So, here's a note block. You craft it using 8 wooden planks and a piece of redstone dust. If you place it, you can right-click on it to tune the note block. When you are in survival mode, left-clicking on the block will play whatever note the block has been tuned to. If you are in creative mode, this will break the block. All note blocks have a range from note 0 to note 24. Every time you right-click, the pitch increases by 1. There is no way to go backwards, so if you want to lower the pitch, you can either continue raising the pitch until it loops back around from 24 to 0, or you can break the block and replace it to start tuning from 0. If you would like to know what note a block is tuned to, you can use your F3 menu. On the right side of the screen, the number your note block is set to will be displayed. Finally, you should know that if there is any block on top of your note block, it will not play any sounds. You can still tune the note block while the extra block is there, though you will not be able to hear the beautiful, steadily increasing pitch that you will likely become very familiar with. Do not let this section scare you. We will not do anything too complicated. However, knowing some basic redstone is very important if you do not have a good sense of rhythm, and also if you don't have several other friends to play note blocks at the same time as you. Using redstone allows you to set specific timing so that your note blocks will play the correct rhythm every time, as long as the game itself doesn't lag. You can also play multiple lines of note blocks at the same time, which makes it possible to create more complicated songs. First, we will use the repeater. This is a repeater. It can be set to 1, 2, 3, or 4 ticks. By placing a repeater facing into a note block, you can power the note block and the block will play its note one time. Placing a repeater facing out of a note block can take the power from an input signal, allowing you to chain the signal through multiple note blocks. Adjusting the ticks your repeater is set to will change the delay between notes, allowing you to adjust the rhythm of your tune. Typically, note block songs will be initiated using a button. You only need to use one input to send the signal and stop sending the signal, unlike flicking a lever twice, or, if you are really weird, placing and breaking a redstone torch or block. You can also use redstone dust to receive a signal from a note block. However, this does not have any tick delay, so you will just play multiple note blocks at the same time. Speaking of playing note blocks at the same time, by placing 3 note blocks side by side, you can play all 3 at once using only one repeater. This is helpful if you want to play a chord. I'll try and explain that later. One final piece you may want to consider is adding pistons. If you want to send a signal from one set of note blocks to several sets of note blocks, you can use pistons to do so, which also allows for easier utilization of the third dimension. However, you will probably want to turn off block noises so your music doesn't sound like this. Ultimately, if you want to make more complicated note block instructions, a more comprehensive knowledge of redstone is pretty useful. We can now tune a note block and play a chain of them. However, perhaps you are looking for a different sound. Well, look no further. By altering the block directly underneath your note block, you can change what instrument the note block plays. Tired of dreary old harp sounds? Try out a piano. Or perhaps that banjo is sounding pretty rusty. Don't fret, you can trade it in for a nice new guitar. There are myriad instruments at your fingertips, and if you call right now, we'll also throw in a free extra-dimensional. Okay, in all seriousness, there are a lot of different instruments to choose from. These are all of the options, though you will probably want to do some experimenting to see what they sound like. As a side note, you may find that you cannot get exactly the sound that you want from these options. Well, remember that you can play multiple notes at the same time. Perhaps combining some instruments using the same note will get you exactly the sound you desire. Mess around, mix it up, see what sounds the best, or what sounds the worst. We will not judge. So, your note block has 25 different settings from note 0 to note 24. Maybe you want to just play a bunch of random notes at random intervals. However, if you want to create actual songs, you will probably need to know what each note is in terms of actual musical pitches. So, let's begin. This chart here demonstrates each note with their real-world counterparts as well as the piano key you would find the note on. Note 0 corresponds to F sharp, note 8 is D, and note 14 is G sharp. A step between 2 notes is known as a half step. So when you move from note 15A to note 16A sharp, you have gone up 1 half step. If you reverse the direction, you are now going down half steps. You may also notice that there are multiples of the same note. Note 6 is C, but so is note 18. These are the same note, but an octave apart. Perhaps you are now wondering what an octave is. We are too. We will try and demonstrate. First, observe that there are 11 other notes between note 6 and note 18. In other words, to get from note 6 to note 18, you have to go up 12 half steps. This is the basic characteristic of an octave. By raising a note 12 half steps, you get the same note but 1 octave higher. For clarity, we will call these the same note, but different pitches. They have the same name, they are distinctly related to each other, but one of them is clearly higher than the other. As an aside, which will not really actually help with your Minecraft note block creations, but which we think is interesting, physics actually defines an octave as a doubling of a note's frequency, or halving if you are going down. So for note 3, which is A, its normal frequency is usually 440 Hz. Note 15 would then have double that frequency at 880 Hz, since note 15 is one octave above note 3. Additionally, you can define a half step by a multiplication, or division, of a frequency by a factor of 1.059463094, or 2 to the power of 1/12. This information is completely irrelevant to the topic of the video, but we do not see any situation in the foreseeable future where it would be more appropriate for us to include it, so you have our apologies. Anyway, we were playing a block game. Hopefully you understand how to navigate this chart by now. If you want, you could memorize it, but we do not think that is necessary. Just search up something like Minecraft note block note chart, and you can have it pulled up in seconds to use alongside some reference material. Speaking of reference material, let us discuss how to actually make a song. This part of the process will require a certain amount of musical know-how. We do not think we are qualified to teach anyone how sheet music works, given that we can barely read it ourselves, so just know that things will be easier for you if you know what this stuff means. If you do not understand sheet music, do not worry. We have a potentially slightly unethical and possibly illegal workaround later in the video. Anyway, if you know sheet music, you shouldn't have too much trouble mapping the note from a song onto the corresponding note block values from the chart in the previous section. First, of course, you need to find sheet music, which may actually be more difficult than learning how to read it. We don't really have any specific advice for this, just go to your favorite search engine and hope that you don't hit a paywall. To be honest, there is not much more advice than that. Without actual sheet music, you can simply try and play it by ear. It is doable, but we would recommend that you try something else before you jump straight into listening to one specific part of one song 50 times in a row to see whether or not you need to raise, or if you are truly unlucky, lower the pitch of one note block by a single half step. Save yourself the trouble, either learn how to read sheet music from someone more qualified than us, or skip on over to Advanced 4 to get some alternative advice. If you have found your notes, that is great. However, the correct notes are only half the battle. Actually, more like 3/4, but whatever. The song won't sound quite correct unless you play the notes at the correct times as well. This is where the repeater returns, with an important role to play. The repeater allows you to play rhythms with your notes, or at least to approximate them. See, in music, there are whole notes, half notes, quarter notes, eighth notes, 16th notes, etc. These different types of notes dictate how long you are meant to hold the note. However, a note block in Minecraft always plays for the same duration, no matter what. So, in a rhythmic sense, you can play the starts of notes in the correct places, but you cannot play the durations of notes accurately. There are some options, such as playing one note repeatedly using a repeater set to one tick, but that might not be the sound you are looking for. Either way, the point is that using different settings on the repeater, you can adjust the space between notes such that a rhythm is created. Depending on the tempo of a song, as well as the type of rhythm, you may need to use more than one repeater between two notes. Equipped with all of the knowledge so far, you should be able to accomplish most basic musical activities. But for those of you who are true elite musicians out there, so you know the general layout of how to put notes in order and how to get a rhythm going. Now you're ready to start trying it yourself. But wait, there is every possibility that you are a true epic note block gamer and you can get everything right on your first try. On the off chance that doesn't happen, this section is for you. You will want to create a plan to make the experimental process smoother. Let's say you need to do some fine-tuning of the spaces between notes. If more than one repeater is required, it would be inconvenient to have to tear everything apart in order to put an extra repeater at the beginning of your song. There are workarounds, sure, but it will save headaches if you just create space to begin with. For another example, you may wish to try out the song with different types of instruments. The only way to change the instrument, however, is to change the block underneath the note block. Therefore, if you plan on changing the instruments out, you may want to build your song off the ground. That makes it easier to access the bottom of the note block, and hence smooths out the experimentation process. If you want to get savvy with commands, you can use this command. Obviously, you need to fill in the X, Y, and Z coordinates to encompass the area you are targeting, but this makes it pretty easy to perform bulk block replacement. There is one caveat, that being you must make sure you do not make any part of your wiring out of a potential target block, because then stuff like this happens. This might not break your redstone, but it does make everything look terrible. If you really want to avoid stuff like this, put your wiring on something you are unlikely to accidentally replace, like a slab or a bunch of obsidian. Also, make sure you are careful with your commands. If you accidentally replace blocks with something like an iron door, all of those doors instantly break, and you will have to manually determine where there are blocks missing. We have never taken a class in music theory, so we will not pretend to be some kind of expert. However, we do know a couple things about it. If you want to create music of your own rather than making specific songs, you will probably want to know what sounds good and what sounds bad. This information can also just help in general with figuring out how to make a specific song, so be aware of that. We are going to try not to get super deep into things that are tangentially related to the topic of the video, so without further ado, let us learn about scales. Anyone who has ever done anything musically related has probably learned a scale or two. In case you have no musical experience, here is the basic concept. A scale is a set of notes that sound good together. Typically, the first scale you will learn is a major scale. There are other types of scales, but we are not going to explain any of them here. If you want to know more, just look up a different video about music scales. Anyway, a major scale has 7 different notes across 8 different pitches. What does that mean, I hear you ask? Well, you have your first note. It doesn't matter what note it is, there is a major scale defined for every note you can pick. To construct a major scale, you then utilize the following pattern to get all the correct notes. Whole step, half step, whole step, half step. Or, in terms of Minecraft note blocks, that is 2 clicks, 1 click, 2 clicks, 2 clicks, 2 clicks, 1 click. To clarify, this pattern is additive. Every step to get to the current note is added to the previous note. As such, if you were doing quick addition in your head for no reason, you will notice that the pitch has increased by 12 half steps. This means that our last note is the same as our first note, just 1 octave above the first note. This is where the word octave actually comes from, the last note being the 8th pitch in the scale. To recap, you have 6 notes in between and the first note, for a total of 7 notes, plus the first note raised up an octave, for a total of 8 pitches. You may be wondering, now what? Well, that's pretty much it. As long as you have chosen your notes correctly, and as long as you do not have terrible rhythmic capabilities, pretty much any music you create out of the notes you have chosen for your major scale should sound good, or at least not noticeably out of tune. So you know what notes sound good when you play them one at a time. You may now wish to play multiple notes at the same time. So let us talk about chords. We will only talk about major chords and major 7th chords, but once again, know that there are other chords out there. If you want to know more, find a better video than this one. Anyway, assuming that you know how a major scale is formed, a major chord is created by selecting notes from that scale. To assemble your major chord, you need the root note, a major 3rd, and a 5th. That is simpler than it might sound. The root is just the first note of your scale. The major 3rd is simply the 3rd note of the scale, and the 5th is, you guessed it, the 5th note of the scale. Playing these notes together at the same time sounds pretty good. But wait, there is more. Not satisfied with your pitiful 3-note chords? Introducing the major 7th. Modifying your previously formed major chord, you can just add the 7th note of the major scale to get even more sound. That makes it pretty easy to remember. The major 7th chord is simply all of the odd notes in the scale. 1, 3, 5, and 7. And just like that, you are pretty much completely prepared for any musical endeavors you see fit to pursue. Okay, not really. You are certainly well equipped to start creating music, but there is a whole lot more for you to explore. Again, this will not become a video explaining everything we can possibly impart about music. Our goal here is to teach you about note blocks. Still, we have not explained how you yourself may decide to go about creating your favorite songs in Minecraft note block form. Well, for that, let us turn now to... You may remember that we mentioned a potentially slightly unethical and possibly illegal workaround. That is what we will be elaborating on here. You see, there are myriad videos of people playing their favorite songs on these piano musical instrument digital interfaces. They lay out exactly what notes will be played and when they will be played to give you the exact sound of the song you are looking for. These videos essentially convert this nonsense into something more comprehensible to somebody who does not know how to read sheet music. All you have to do is match the notes played in the video to this chart of note block piano equivalent notes, and you will be well on your way to impressing all of your friends with your immense time and patience. Now, we cannot pretend that this will be efficient. If you only have one computer monitor, you will likely be doing a lot of switching tabs between Minecraft, your reference material, and the chart. Maybe if you really want to, you can print the chart out and look at the video on a mobile device, if you have one. There is not one specific way in which you must structure this process. Just do whatever makes things most efficient for yourself. Everything you know by now should be what you need for any song you want to make. There is only one small, tiny little issue. It is pretty annoying to require a player to travel multiple kilometers just to listen to one song. Maybe you would like to play some music at your base and not take a field trip to Antarctica every time you push play. Well, it is possible to do these things. You simply need to do a lot more work than before. First, you can grab this long string of redstone and note blocks, squish it into an intestine-like clump, and listen to it from there. You do not have to build all on the same plane, so if one layer becomes too expansive to hear, just build a second layer. But maybe there is simply too much song for you to get within earshot. shot? Well, depending on what you are making, there are various solutions available to you. Probably the simplest trick is knowing just how compact you can go. If you have a single chain of note blocks, you can align them to double back on themselves such that you are wasting as little space as possible. Additionally, if you are activating multiple note blocks with one chain, you can structure them like so, which is just about the highest density of note blocks that can still be played, which is possible to create in the game. Now, that can only get you so far. What saves much more space is if you can find parts of your song that will repeat. By using Redstone, you only need to build one chunk of note blocks rather than a massive chain, then simply loop the signal. This works especially well for any non-melody instruments, such as percussion or bass lines. However, this can produce problems of its own. Often you will find a part of a song that repeats multiple times, but does not continue repeating throughout the entirety of the song. You need a way to easily turn the loop off. Thankfully, there are some options available to you, though you will need a somewhat more advanced Redstone knowledge. What you choose to do will also depend on what you want for your music. For instance, maybe you do not care if the song has a few piston noises interspersed throughout. Either they do not bother you, or you are just going to turn block noises off anyway. In that case, a setup like this allows the loop to be toggled on and off fairly easily. Perhaps, however, you plan to make this on a server and you cannot count on all of your fellow Minecraft players to turn off their block noises. Fear not, because Redstone once again has the answer, and it is only ever so slightly more complicated. This contraption uses a dropper, a hopper, a comparator, and an unstackable item. Placing the item in the dropper and feeding the hopper into the front of the dropper, then running a comparator out of the hopper, you can create a short pulse in your loop, and it is completely silent for the most part. To stop the loop, you need to power the hopper. This locks the hopper, meaning the item cannot pass back into the dropper, meaning the loop runs one more time. This does have numerous drawbacks. For one, it needs a bit more space than a simple piston switch. It also has a delay of 3 ticks and possibly more if you need to augment the comparator signal. It is not very strong, so try and plan out where you will put things beforehand so that the beginning of the loop can be as close to this mechanism as possible. The hopper-dropper combo can also be very finicky. If you power a block too close to the dropper, it tends to power the dropper itself despite not touching it because Redstone is weird. Messing around with different block placements, this kind of setup seems to work correctly. Of course, why would you even need to power a block near the dropper? Well, for the hopper, of course. You are going to need a separate Redstone line that runs into the hopper so that it can be locked at the correct time. This will probably require several repeaters to make sure the timing is correct, though you do usually have a fair amount of wiggle room. Just remember to power the hopper before the last time the music chunk is supposed to repeat. One final consideration, when you loop for the last time, this dropper will not have anything in it. Every other time it looped, the unstackable item was inside, and powering the dropper put the item inside the hopper. Now, with the hopper locked, the item cannot pass back into the dropper. As such, when this loop comes back around, the dropper will click. There are 2 methods you can use to fix this. First, you can create an elaborate redstone line full of repeaters and pulse extenders to make sure that the dropper gets powered from a second source and stays powered for the entire last loop such that it cannot be repowered and create this clicking sound. Alternatively, you can put another item in the dropper. There is practically no reason for you to ever do the first option, and we do not think it should have even been included as an option, but someone insisted that it be mentioned. There are other tricks that make redstone note block machines work smoother, but this is not supposed to be a redstone video. This is about note blocks, and we have already gotten pretty far away from the topic of music, so that is where we are going to leave you. Look at that, you made it to the end of the video. With any luck, you were able to find something that you were looking for, and potentially something you were not looking for. We encourage you to go and be creative, just to see what you can make. Additionally, feel free to suggest corrections or anything else we should explain, related to note blocks or not. But either way, that is going to be it from us for this video. We hope you enjoyed, and stay safe. Goodbye.